Hello everybody and welcome to the latest episode of Draulon and Joe Talk CSGO. My name is Balázs Draulon Lengyel, and with me is Joe Tolkien Fanatic Cardali, and it's Christmas come early, as joining us is none other than Semmler, the man himself. How are you doing on this fine Friday morning, Semmler?
Just fine, man. Just fine. I love it because right now in Sweden, right, the sun doesn't come out until maybe like 8:39. So
Really?
I have this beautiful view where it's nice and dark, but you can just start to see a little bit of just starting to get a little bit lighter out. So as this podcast progresses, I'll just get that beautiful sunrise right here, and maybe that's a metaphor for things, I don't know, things to come out, I don't know. But I'll have this beautiful sunrise to enjoy with you guys.
Yeah, you're in Stockholm right now, right? In the Fragbite offices?
Yeah,
Yeah.
They're pretty cool about it. They took a building, and on the second floor of that building, they had a bunch of little rooms basically that they rent out to companies, and so they gave me one of the rooms at a very good price. And so it gives me kind of because I did the whole working from home thing, for a couple years, several years. And eventually you kind of get like a little cabin fever, a little stir crazy if you're just working out of your living room all day long, and then it's like, okay, I'm done working, but I'm still in my living room. So it's nice to have a little office, little room that I can kind of turn into a man cave and just go into town for.
Also, like increases your productivity, right? But it's
you would think that, yeah, but
debatable.
Debatable. It increased my productivity when Phil was here with me, because we have Phil's our media guy in Room on Fire, still is, but he used to be here with me in Stockholm, and so that helped with the productivity because all of a sudden I had to look over my shoulder and be like, oh shit, hold on, get off Reddit, I gotta actually do some work, but now it's a bit more about that iron discipline.
But Phil was just playing World of Warcraft the entire time. Like, you don't have to cover for him. Everyone knows.
Yeah, dude, he's unreal. I mean, I love it because I used to be like that with WoW, where I was so hardcore into it. And then I've got Phil, who is here, who's doing the exact same thing. I mean, he was pushing Mythic, trying to be a top guild in Europe and all that. And so, I mean, it was fun to see it from his perspective, where he'd put a lot of work into WoW, a lot of work.
That was his job.
Getting paid for that, farming gold. Yeah. Anyway, so
we're all gamers, right? So we're all allowed our foibles, our time.
There you have it.
Thanks.
Right. So let's just go back, rewind the years. Just go a few years back. You and it's Semmler Anders, right? The premier casting duo for CSGO. You guys got all the grand finals. You guys were like the centerpiece of attention, and then I wouldn't say like it was a recession, but there was like a transition phase where other caster duos started coming up, right? You have to think about HenryG and Sadokist as the main culprits, and I want to kind of ask your opinion on how did you experience this whole phase? How did you experience not, I wouldn't say falling from the top, but suddenly having a much more saturated work environment, so to say.
I mean, you can say falling from the top because that's exactly what happened, right? But it's a bit of a how to describe it. There are a bunch of things that go into it, right? So going all the way back, Anders and I, the reason we got to the top is because we had the freedom to do whatever we wanted whenever we wanted, which meant that we were casting every day, every night. We were casting, and whenever there were games going on, everything, that's all that we were doing, and we both had the freedom to do that. He was still trying to figure things out for himself, just getting out of uni, had a lot of time on his hands, and he decided this is kind of what I want to do in the evenings and in the early mornings too, because he would do North American games as well. And myself, it was the same thing. I was living in a goddamn attic. No, at the time I was still in the Good Studio when we first started out. But again, the Good Studio, I had a room with my PC, and I never left that room. So it was just a matter of just sitting there, and then, games are on, all right, start casting, and just doing that every day. So I had the freedom to be able to just focus 100% on CS commentary, and that kind of kept going. I moved into an attic after that. I wanted to get out of the good house because things were changing, and I was like, right, okay, time to start, spreading the wings and getting out a little bit. And still, again, right, I just lived in an attic and I casted CS. And then things progressed. Things kept going where we really just dumped all of our time and effort into CS because we were capable of doing it back then. As things progressed in the scene, you start making more money and you start getting a bit more comfortable. So you don't necessarily, because at the same time, back in the day, you had to do it that much because if you wanted to be a full-time commentator, you were relying on stream revenue to pay your bills. Mm-hmm. And hell, Anders had the majority of the stream revenue back then because he actually had more responsibility than I did, right? I was just like, I got to pay $300 for this attic per month and then $100 for like noodles and whiskey, you know? That was pretty much that was like my responsibility at the time. He had, you know, girlfriend, house payments, all that sort of stuff, and so he took the lion's share of the ad rev. But back in the day, you actually could do that with CS and with Twitch. Twitch has changed massively over the past several years. Maybe 4 years ago, you know, the ad revenue just took a massive hit. And so we were really lucky with when it all happened, when things took off with CSGO and that there were more events and leagues and people were actually willing to pay us for commentary. Because about that time is when all of a sudden you started making a quarter of the revenue off of ads off of Twitch. And so it really worked out for us. We got really lucky in that sense in the timing because I don't think that we could have kept going if we still relied solely on Twitch as our main breadwinner because, it went from making a few grand a month to making a few hundred, and then, you know, you can't really live off of that, two of you, right?
Yep.
So it was definitely a bit touch and go, but we got really lucky with the timing, and we just kept grinding. The fall came when we took our feet off the gas a little bit. We started to just say, well, we're traveling 9 months, 10 months, out of the year right now. To do Pro League because at the time, we needed to be in Cologne to do that, and then there were all the events on top of it, and then E-League picked up, and there was so much going on that eventually we decided, okay, we did what I was advocating to the players, which was to just focus on one league. Excuse me. Because the players were playing all the leagues, and we were trying to keep up, right? We were doing all the Pro League, and then maybe we do ECS or something like that at the time, but that was obviously like Dan and Bardolph. But I mean, we kind of, it was like, okay, we have Pro League, which is, 2 months of your year, or almost 3 months of your year taken up with Pro League, and then those guys had ECS, and then E-League came into the picture. And so we saw E-League, we were like, this is a much more compact format. If we do Pro League, it's going to be one thing. We know that, but it's 30, 35 days more, that on the road, spread out over months, right? Whereas if we do E-League, bam, it's just a month, where we get to just be in Atlanta and then wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, and then we're back home again. And so that's when we saw the chance to like, okay, maybe we can start taking a few of these travel days off the calendar and having a bit more time at home. And well, that opened the door for Sadokist and Henry. So before that, there was the PGL league also. You got to remember there was even PGL in the mix back then. And so Sado and Henry got that gig, or Sado did at least. I think, yeah, Sado and Henry got that gig. So they moved to Bucharest and took that over. And then when Pro League opened up, because Anders and I decided to go with E-League, they got to do Pro League. And so you can see how us moving out of these spaces basically allowed for Sado and Henry to start, making their brand. And then, right, Anders and I had been around for so long. You got these new guys who are basically everywhere now because Pro League takes up so much time. And, well, with Anders and I trying to take a step back and have a bit more balance in our lives, those guys could just go ham, could just nonstop do. They could be like us 2 years before, where they could just do everything. And they did that. They were on the road for like 11 months or something nuts. They just were never home. They were always at events or always living on the road. And so it was fun. It was just they went through exactly what we went through. A couple of years later. And so that kind of opened the gates. And then I guess then we start getting into the recent times where at the end of last year, I had a couple of very close people, pass. And so that kind of really screwed with my head. And so at that point, right, end of last year, end of 2016, I was a total mess. Before then, Anders had a few things that was going on, and so it kind of went from crisis to crisis. Where, right, Anders wasn't on his game; he was getting flamed by the community and wrecked, and then, but I was still hanging in there, and then that shit happened to me, and then and then I was the wreck, right, where I just wasn't able to really, see where I wanted to take my commentary. I think we started to overthink the commentary because there was so much hard shit going on that we weren't really having as much fun. So when our style of commentary relies heavily on, and that's how I believe all commentary should be done, relies heavily on you just having fun and going with the flow and being natural and doing what comes naturally to you. That became really hard all of a sudden because, you're not in a good place in your head. And so I had already started to try and figure out a systematic way of doing commentary before that. That could be a bit of a system that relied on stats, on figuring things out, on strategy, and less on jokes and the kind of things that you really need to be happy to be able to, come up with jokes on the fly and do stuff like that, which wasn't coming as naturally, right, because we had all these pressures on us. So I started to look for a more streamlined approach to do commentary, a bit more, something that could just be structural. But obviously the community didn't really like that, right? They thought either my catchphrases were too much or I was getting boring, right? Because they were used to Semmler of old, Semmler who was laughing along and all that, who didn't have any pressure on him. So it's a combination of things. It's a combination of Anders and I stepping back and allowing there to be space for these other commentators to come up and facilitating that, because Sado and Henry didn't know fuck all. They didn't know anybody at the time, and so it was Anders and I who were basically going to these TOs, vouching for them and saying, "Yeah, take these guys. They're really good. Take them." And sure enough, those guys would then, reach out to Sado and Henry, and then they would come on board, and that's how it worked at the time, right? It was esports at the beginning and the grassroots was always about who you knew, which is why I've told everybody who asks me, I'm like, go to every LAN you can, and when you go to that LAN, find out the hotel that the people are staying at. And I know this is a dick move, but find out the hotel and you just go and sit and become a barfly. And you just
networking one-on-one.
You just got to talk to people. You got to network. You have to know somebody in esports. And this is it's like in esports. This is like in anything. If you want to be hungry and try and make a space for yourself in an industry, you have to figure out who are the movers and shakers in that industry, and you have to get to know them, and you have to make sure that if an opportunity comes up, your face is one of the faces that pops up in their mind when they think, oh, who could we, we need this person, like we need a person for this. Who could that be? Oh, yeah, this guy Semmler, right? And you kind of go from there, right? And so back then it was really just, Sado and Henry didn't know anybody. And so Henry did, Sado definitely didn't. And so we were kind of pushing everything. And at the time I was, it was all about Room on Fire. It was all about trying to get more opportunities for commentators, trying to really push on that front. And so it all kind of worked together where, Anders and I worked. It's almost like we worked towards our own downfall in a way, because we wanted to take a step back, and so that obviously provides more space. We wanted to provide more space for people as well, and then here we are now today, right?
Yeah, I'm glad that you touched on all of that because it's all points that we want to cover in the other questions. But now just going a little bit back again. At the start, I watched Richard's video talking about you, and he mentioned you and Anders were the ones who worked out this package deal when it comes to casting, right? So you guys who outlined that whole process, because before that it was the wild west out there.
Yeah.
And
I came into it. Well, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So do you think it's a fair comparison? Because with NIP, and there's this whole story to them, they came in very early, very prepared, and which is why they had this wonderful streak of maps and this whole winning streak. And when other teams actually caught up to them, that's when their whole performance started normalizing. Do you think that that's an analogy which might fit you as well? You guys were so ahead of your game back then that when other duos started catching up to you, it became a little bit harder.
Certainly. Well, it didn't become harder in that sense. It really, I think, it's really all the lessons that you learn through commentary, all over these past several years. Everything that I've learned when it comes to, what makes you happy and how to, because really I think commentary relies heavily on happiness. Because you need to be yourself and you need to flow and you need to just be having a good time, I think. And that's when people at home, they're going to have a good time because they know that you're having a good time. Everybody's having a good time. You're all friends together watching CS. Yep. And that's how it should be. And as soon as you start overthinking things as a commentator, that's, I think, when you start to degrade, your commentary starts to degrade. And so, Anders and I reached out to Anders because I had a vision on how I think CS commentary needed to be done, and I had the experience coming from different games that I knew it was possible. I knew there was a style we could bring the Tastosis style of commentary into CS, because I grew up, like, when I was first starting out in commentary, Tastosis were gods, right? They were, if you were a commentator, you were listening to the GSL, you were trying to understand how they did their thing, and then you kind of modeled your way on it. Those guys, and they give credit to Anders and I, and Richard, he gave credit to Anders and I on that, but really, Tasteless and Artosis were way ahead of the everybody else in terms of commentary, in terms of what I think commentary needed to be. And so I learned a lot from them. And Bloodline Champions, man, back in the day, that's really back in the day, Bloodline Champions, every day with my co-commentator Cast, we would be having calls. How do we approach the commentary? What do we need to do? How do we think this is going to work? And so BLC was a fast-paced game, and so we used to bounce back and forth between rounds with each other. So one round, one guy would do the commentary, the next round, the other guy, and then we started to develop the handoff mid-round, and then we started to develop the flow. And then, so all of those lessons I learned with BLC on figuring out, what fit me and what fit like the style of commentary, I was able to then bring into StarCraft 2 with Apollo. When I casted some StarCraft 2 with him, we had a bit of that back and forth, right, and got better at it. And then when it came to CS, I was solo casting. I mean, all the casters were solo casting it back then. Anders would bring in like some pro players every now and again or something along those lines. But if nobody was around, you were solo casting. And so I was like, this is silly. Anders, I think, is a great commentator. We should team up. And it was also very competitive back then, because it was whoever got their stream up first, whoever got the game up first, because it was totally different from the way it is now. Tournament organizers didn't give a fuck back then. They just put the GoTV out there on HLTV, and whoever wanted to stream it, whoever wanted to watch it, they could do that. And so they didn't care, because you weren't getting the viewership. For them, it didn't really matter if you had 1,000 viewers. They're like, what, 1,000 viewers? We can't monetize that. We don't care. So here, have the GoTV. It wasn't until after DreamHack Winter 2013, in like the spring of 2014, that all of a sudden, after DreamHack Winter, there was some serious viewership. We were starting to get 10, 15,000 people, and at the time, that was big. That was really big. Before DreamHack Winter 2013, if you had 6,000 viewers, you were over the moon. You were like, yeah, man, great night. We really nailed it. Awesome, right? It wasn't until DreamHack Winter 2013, the first major, that everything just took off. And so the way that I saw it back then was, why are we competing against each other when we could just do what Tastosis did? We could literally just team up, become a brand together, build this brand together, and then we dominate. Then the tournament organizer, they get a package commentator deal every time, right? They don't need to worry about, who with who, and is it going to work, and are they going to have chemistry, and da-da-da. No, we just go to them, and we're like, we've worked together for months now, there's a solid chemistry here, we know how to entertain, this is your package, boom. And that's how we built it up from there. And so that's how it all kind of started out, which was essentially, I approached Anders and I was like, listen, this is the dream right now. I think this is what we can do, and I think we're in the perfect time and space to do it. Let's go. And I still remember that he was hesitant at the start. He was like, I don't know about, the freedom and da-da-da. Mainly he wanted to keep casting with guys like Hiko and shit. And I was like, yeah, dude, Hiko's a player. He is going to play. He is not a commentator. He is not going to follow through with you on all these tournaments. He is a player first and foremost. So what are you thinking? Are you thinking short term right now, or are you thinking long term, where this is where we could go? This is where we could be. And so eventually he came around, and eventually that's what we did.
So you talk about Tasteless and Artosis and kind of developing your craft both on an individual level and on a partnership level, right? Do you think there's ever a point where kind of your craft has been maxed out, or are you kind of constantly learning?
Yeah, that's you're always learning, but you can really phone it in if you want to. Commentators can really just, as soon as you start getting the basics down, and so long as that's smooth, you could phone it in all day long. And so that's a trap that you can fall into very easily as a commentator. And when there is so much commentary going on, when you have so much going on day in, day out, it does start to turn into a grind sometimes. You've got the big events to look forward to, like the majors, but when you're just doing these online leagues, they're trash. Online leagues are just, day in, day out, same story. They're not even LAN. That's why that was a big part of why we wanted to do E-League, is all of a sudden we're like, oh, wait, hold on, this is LAN. And then every week we'll have a crowd in there, so we'll have our own LAN, like actual tournament every week. This is how we want to do it. Let's go, right? Rather than just being in like, and that's the thing, when it came to online games, the tournament organizers really wanted everybody to be in a studio together, and I was like, but why? The players aren't there. We don't need to be there for everything that we're doing with the broadcast. It's just talking heads on a camera. We can just do that from home, or we can white label a studio at a home, green screen it or something, and then just kind of same production level, and then we're good. E-League was a totally different thing, where it was like, this is LAN. And so this is why Overwatch League is really interesting to me, because again, this is LAN. You have the players there, you have the fans in front of them. It's a LAN, it's a mini LAN. And so if you're going to do a league, then that I think is like the minimum, right? Where you really go the distance and make it, as close to LAN as possible, as close to like some standalone LAN tournament as possible. And so that's why E-League was so appealing at the time. It was just like, wow, okay, cool. This is the full package. This is how we should be doing a league if we're going to do one, right? Kind of forgot the original question.
It's all good.
I think it was like kind of like, do you feel like casting duos have like a skill cap? Because, and I was talking to like Moses at I think it was Epicenter, and he said like he thinks that one of the reasons that like Sadokist and HenryG is like so popular is, and like they are so far ahead in the casting business, is that they have like the insight and the experience of a former professional player in the form of HenryG. So do you think like having a former
source
pro
players,
bullshit,
please?
Henry is a pro player. Get out. I mean, that's the thing. There is no such thing, and that is the fun thing about that whole argument to me. That's why because that's how it used to be in CS. You had to be a former pro, or you had to have some kind of background, otherwise people wouldn't listen to you. I was like, fuck that noise. All you need is to be entertaining and to have fun. That's all people want. Because the vast majority of people who are tuning in, the small number of voices out there that say, I want hardcore analysis. Guess what? We were doing Snipe Live. You want hardcore analysis? You want us just breaking down shit the entire broadcast long? No hype commentary, no storytelling, no whatever. Snipe Live. That's what we were doing. So, there are, and we weren't getting mass viewers from that either. We were only getting like a couple thousand, right? If the wind tunnel that has become Reddit of, we want hardcore shit, coming at you like that. These guys don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Well, just tune into a broadcast like that then, if that's what you want, right? Because that's the hardcore side of things. What the vast majority of the public actually want is just to be entertained and to have fun. Yeah. And so the whole ex-pro and thing, that's bullshit. That's just something to fall back on if you don't think that you're confident enough in your game to actually be entertaining and have fun while doing it. Because Sado and Henry are where they are now because Anders and I just dropped off and stopped having fun. And Sado and Henry, this is going to be the same thing. I mean, people also get tired of you. I mean, like in terms of community, if you are there doing everything, there is a burnout. There is a bit of a burnout side to it where people, they just start hearing your catchphrases time and time again. And you do have words that you go back to. And that same person is going to hear you say peekaboo, or, for my example, right? Or, they're going to hear you say some of these words over and over again because it's just ingrained in you. And it's also just how you do your commentary sometimes. You have these words and you try it. Like, if people think it was bad, a year ago with peekaboo, etc., dude, you should have been listening to us like 3-4 years ago. That was all. We were creating the terms for how things, how commentators get things across to the viewer. Those were like, we were figuring it all out back then. And so if you wanted to hear us say something 10 times a broadcast, well, that was the time, because we were really just ingraining it. And then it normalized. But whether there's a skill cap or no, I don't there. To me, there is no skill cap. There's only a skill cap if you start picking apart the commentary and start having a system with the commentary. Because then you start to rely on a model. And if you start to rely on a model, then you're no longer an artist, then you're an engineer. And, well, then there can be a skill cap, I think. And that's the trap that I fell into, where I started to think, well, I'm not, the community doesn't like me anymore. They don't like my jokes. I can't be funny anymore. So what can I do when I commentate? Because if I can't be me, then I have to be something else, right? And so that's when I tried to start becoming an engineer and trying to pick apart my commentary and start thinking like, oh, I need to do this and I need to do this. And oh, that maybe that didn't work. So I'll do this now. And I started overthinking everything. And the reality is that if you're a commentator, you need to do what comes naturally to you. That's the only way that you're going to succeed. You can't listen to the community. You can't listen to anybody else. You may have a mentor, as in somebody who has been experienced in commentary. I had James Harding when I was coming up. He really took me under his wing, and when I was casting StarCraft 2 with Apollo or some BLC, he would kind of give me some feedback, but just some pointers, right? Nothing where he was just like, this is shit that you're doing. He'd just be like, hey, maybe, take a look at this and tweak this a little bit. I'd be like, okay, yeah, shit, that makes sense, right? But it was something that was natural, that would naturally improve my commentary. It wasn't something that was like lopping off a piece of it, right? And so when it comes to actual skill level, I think that only comes into play when you start overthinking your commentary. What really needs to happen for a good commentator to bloom is to just trust in himself and do what comes naturally to him. And if he does that, then I think the skill level is infinite. Because then you're talking about jokes, then you're talking about quick snap observations that you can only make when you're really feeling good and you're in that flow. You're all those sorts of things to me is art, and that is infinite. When you start thinking about how to structure a cast, that to me is engineer work, and that's where there is a skill cap, because you're going to be following a model, and that's not necessarily the way it should be done, I think. And that's where you can start to really trip over yourself, and it's a dangerous trap to fall into, because you need to always keep in mind what comes natural to you and what are your strengths and what allows you to have fun doing what you're doing. Because if you aren't having fun, you're fucked.
So you kind of anticipated my next question here already, but so you've talked about how kind of you and Anders making way and leaving a void kind of allowed for the rise of Henry and Sadokist, right? And then you alluded to the fact that will most likely happen to them again. Given the way that the CS circuit currently operates, do you see this kind of cycle as an inevitability, like just doomed to repeat itself? Or is there a way that we can kind of avoid this vicious cycle, do you think?
That'll come down to Sado and Henry and the existing commentators right now. Do they do what Anders and I did by stepping back and giving space? If you want to talk about burnout, they come up with all sorts of fluffy reasons, but the main reason for burnout is a fear of losing what you have. And you constantly say yes to events, because what happens if you don't? Maybe there is going to be that next guy who's going to come up and who's going to be good enough and who with time can become great. And you can't allow that if you're at the top of the field. And so it's entirely possible. If Sado and Henry start taking more time off, then they will allow for more space. It won't be Moses and Anders, I don't think, because I think that they're still too much in the engineer side of commentary and not in the flow, having fun style of commentary. And so I don't think it will be them. I think it will be somebody else that'll come into the space that's created by some of the top tier now, who are going to take a step back and allow for that to happen. Because the only other option is if you're a tier 1 commentator, is to do what Anders and I did at the beginning, which is to lock down deals with tournament organizers and guarantee events. And as soon as you have that security, that is the best security that you can have as a freelancer in CS, is to have these relationships with the tournament organizers and maintain those relationships with the tournament organizers and make sure that you lock in events year long. The only thing is that greed then comes into play. Because if you do that, well, then you can't negotiate 6 months down the line if the game is bigger. Of course, CS is different now. It's not like it was when we were coming up, when it was just blowing up and constantly growing and exponentially growing year after year, right? And so, there was that motivation to be like, well, if we sign this year-long deal, then by the end of the year, we could be screwing ourselves over. We could be asking for twice as much, right? And so that's a different set of bananas. Right now, what you have with CS is that it's now stable. And so the real way to longevity here is not to try and push for more salary in CS. It is to lock down year-long deals and guarantee your space. And if you do that, then you have the longevity, then you have the security going forward, because you're not giving the space for anybody new to come up. Now, that being said, there is always going to be a chance for somebody to come up by doing the dream hacks and by doing small time events like Copenhagen Games is still one of the very last lands that we have, but I mean actual free lands that we have, by doing like ESWC, by doing small events like this, by really fighting and getting those spots, there is a small chance, because as soon as you do one of those lands, maybe you get shown, maybe a tournament organizer is tuning in to see what their competition is doing. They listen to the commentary like, damn, this guy's pretty good. Maybe that's the chance that you need. But it's hard. It's a long, hard fight now, I think, if you want to make it in CS.
Do you have anyone like at the top of your mind that you can think of who might be part of that next wave of kind of the great CS talent, or do you think they're still kind of bubbling below the surface?
I think it's still bubbling. I mean, there have been... Vince is good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Vince is solid. Vince, the thing that's holding Vince back is just confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he needs to believe in himself. I mean, that is kind of what you need as well to be to be at the top, is that you need to have invincible confidence in yourself. You have to just be arrogant and completely self-centered and know that you are the best in the room. And if you have that, well, then sky's the limit. And so, it's there are a lot of things that need to go into becoming to get to the top. And if you want to be at the tippy top, right, then you need to be confident. You need to know exactly what you're doing, and you need to know that you need to have faith in yourself that you can push through and do it, right? And so right now, I think that's what's holding Vince back personally. He needs to just believe in himself and fully commit and just go in, because community love him right now. So he's got a golden opportunity in that. Community have got his back. And so if he really just went out to those TOs and fought and just said, listen, I've been around. You see my resume, different man. Let's go. Have some faith in me and let's get this going. Vince could totally be, not budget Anders, but new Anders.
Anders 2.0.
That's cool, Anders. Yeah.
Fuck that whole comparison to Anders thing. He'll just be Vince.
You talk about fresh and this new broadcast talent coming in. Do you think it's still possible to break into that very top? Because right now it's still dominated by this three casting duos. The James Bardoff, DDK crew, Anders and Moses, and then you have HenryG and Sadokist. And you mentioned that there's this constant fear of make hay while the sun shines, because if you step back a little bit, then someone else can actually come in and take that space. So do you think that this kind of prevents this new talent from moving into this scene? Is this like this devilish loop that just doesn't allow new talent to come in and burns out the existing one?
Yeah, basically. I mean, I just answered that very question twice. So I mean, it's going to take the tier 1 to step back, and it's still going to be an uphill battle. But if you want to be a CS commentator, then there is still a chance for you. It's just a very minimal chance now. But that doesn't mean it's not worth doing. It's not worth fighting for.
But you talked about this whole planning out your deals in advance. And a lot of broadcast talent I talked to mentioned that they think that these exclusivity deals are kind of the future of CS:GO. They partner down with a tournament organizer and say that, hey, I will just be your exclusive casting duo. Do you agree with this? Do you think that this is actually what needs to happen in order to kind of fix this whole burning gal stuff?
So exclusivity deals, again, I'll reiterate, right? Because this is what I was saying earlier. If you are exclusivity deals now make sense in CS. When CS was exponentially growing year after year, it didn't make sense because you were potentially shorting yourself out. And if you were at the top of the pack, like we were, right, there wasn't anybody to really compete with you back then. And so you didn't really worry too much about getting the events. Now, where CS is stagnant or has stopped growing, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's stagnant, but it has stopped growing, then you see that there's going to be a plateau. And as soon as that plateau is reached, and we've been in it for a while now, things are not going to keep growing. They're going to start tightening up. And as soon as they start tightening up, well, then that's when the exclusivity deals become very important, I think, because you need to make sure that deal locks in, and you need to have it for the entire year. And shit, if you can, you get it for 2 years, because then you actually have security. Yep. And that's what's going to happen, I think. Now it's the only time that it really makes sense where. For a CS caster, now is the time it makes sense to go for long-term exclusivity deals and really make sure that you carve out your space, because otherwise, you can get pushed aside. Because when it's growing, it's all great to be making X, but when you have guy who is up and coming, and who's got the chops and who's got the hunger, most importantly, so he's going to do whatever it takes to get into those events because that's what he wants to do, and he charges this compared to you. Well, the TO, I mean, DreamHack are legendary for this. ESL as well, no matter what Joe says on Twitter, which I thought was the most ridiculous tweet ever, where he's just like, people undercutting people. I'm just like, dude, ESL, that's all ESL do. They find people, they threaten you with them. They're like, oh, well, if you guys want that much, why don't we just go get the commentators here? I'm like, but I mean, this is the reality is that the TOs, and that's exactly what DreamHack are doing with DreamHack Open. They can get the tier 1 if they want, but why don't they just get these guys who are good enough and get them space, and they cost 3-4 times less.
So after like 2.5 solid years of probably working almost every weekend, like you mentioned in 2015, 2016, and most of 2017, you definitely have obviously stepped back a little bit. So we just kind of wanted to find out kind of how you've been spending your time, kind of, now that you're not on a broadcast every other weekend. You've obviously been doing some alternative streams. You mentioned this night you picked up some hosting duties at Blast as well. So kind of what have you been doing in this newfound free time of yours, and maybe what interesting opportunities were presented to you that you didn't necessarily pursue?
I was looking for a healthier lifestyle because so basically let's see, end of last year is basically where everything really just hit the fan. I had a couple of deaths, people that were very close to me. I had like the career wasn't doing well. It felt like everything was falling apart. Everything that we built over the years was falling apart. Didn't really know who to trust or what was going on. And so it was just, and over the span of the months, that followed DreamHack Masters, etc., right? I think was the lowest point, DreamHack Masters, where things really fell apart in terms of, I'm just not happy. I'm not happy at all. And I need to change something if I'm going to, if I'm going to keep being in this industry. I need to find some kind of balance that allows me to be happy, because what I've got right now is definitely not doing it. And so, it was about DreamHack Masters in April when Anders and I had a couple months off after that to kind of, because again, we weren't doing Pro League, we weren't doing, we didn't have these deals anymore, and E-League kind of left us high and dry, where they were supposed to have 2 seasons of CS all per year, which is why we went with them in 2016. But then in 2017, they're like, well, guys, you know what? We're not going to have a CS season in the spring. And we're like, okay, then. So,
oh, really?
So, all right, great, cool, thanks. That was definitely frustrating on our side of things, because we were just like, well, we counted on doing 2 seasons per year, and now we don't have one of the seasons. That kind of blows. And so it left a big chunk in our calendar. But as things do sometimes work out, I think that benefited us. I think we really needed the breather. We needed time to be able to just kind of sit and think a little bit and figure out what was going on. And so Anders was incredibly patient with me, because I was not in a good place at all, and I was very hard to work with at that point. And so he was very patient with me. But that's how a relationship works out. You're patient when, basically it's all about understanding each other. And so when he was down, I was trying to help him, and when I was down, he was trying to help me. And so I was back and forth, right? And so I believe that was like how things were supposed to work. But at that point, I was looking for something positive. And so that's when I picked up climbing again, because I was like, when I climbed when I was in my teens, that was the healthiest, strongest I've ever been. Like one finger pull-ups and stuff, like I could do things, and I felt really confident about it, and I really enjoyed it. I loved it, right? And then I came away from that because I moved to Sweden, and I just, gaming took over. I didn't have time for climbing anymore, and I stopped climbing. And so I was like, I have financial security now. I have gigs. I have time. More importantly, I have time, and I want something positive in my life again. That's what it's going to be. And so now, whenever I basically, since May, I just decided I'm climbing, I've just climbed 3-4 times a week since. And I think that was the major thing, to have a hobby, something that I could really dig my teeth into, because climbing is alpinism, all that is huge history, and there's so much to learn, and it's fascinating, the people that are in it, and it's just unreal, the stories, the people, everything. And so all of a sudden I had something that was completely separate from esports, which had become my work, and which had become stressful and really difficult to deal with sometimes. a lot of the joy of esports had gone out. The more you work in the industry as well, the more cynical you get, because you start to learn it's not this ideal world, right? This dream world of esports where everybody is, friends and looking out to grow something. It's like, no. The more you work in the industry, the more you realize it's like real life. Everybody's just trying to make a buck. They're trying to survive. They're not friends. They're friends. They show friends on the outside, but they're definitely not friends, when it comes to actually what happens. And so, you come into esports thinking, wow, man, awesome. And then as things go on, you start to realize, oh shit, well, this is just like real life. And so it wasn't giving me, that kind of ideal world to strive for anymore. It was really just, this is still makes me happy in terms of commentary, but in terms of like the grander scheme of things, the dreams and all that I had, all of that came away. And so when I realized after 6 years nearly of just dedicating myself to esports, I realized, well, I'm not going to get what I need out of esports. Like, it's not going to give me what I need to be happy in that sense, right? I can't fully devote myself to this because it's not going to be enough for me. And so then I just turned to climbing to give me that. And it's been fantastic so far, at least. Now, I really enjoy the challenge. I feel like you learn so much about yourself when it comes to climbing as well. Every time you get on the wall, every move you make is a decision. You're constantly having to push yourself and make a decision every move. Am I going to keep going? Am I going to keep going? Am I going to keep going? And you have to push through that fear every time as well, because the higher you get, you're like, shit, man, I'm really up there now. This may hurt if I fall, right? So there were a lot of, so basically I started to not zero in on esports so much. I cut myself off from a lot, or I took a big step back on a lot, because I used to really, I used to really care. I used to really care about other people's issues. And then I realized, I think a big lesson that I learned at that point as well is that it's not my responsibility to make people happy. I can't take that on myself to try and spend all of my time and energy trying to make others happy. I needed to really take a step back and just focus on how the fuck do I get happy now, right? Because I've spent so long worrying about, other people's problems. So, what about me? And so that's what this year has been about. It's been about climbing. It's been about playing other games without feeling guilty about playing other games, because it's all right to play other games. You don't need to only play CS. It was about just making sure I had time for my girlfriend again, for my friends in Stockholm, really trying to spend time and just, figure out what does it mean to live in Stockholm and live in one place and not travel for a month, and just like enjoy yourself and wake up and have like a steady schedule where you're getting 3 square meals a day, you're sleeping 8 hours a night, you're living a structured life in a way, right? So that's what this year has been about. That's what replaced CS, or what replaced the grind, was just a kind of a quest for happiness. And I feel pretty damn good right now. So I mean, like, I feel so much better, like unbelievable. Now that I don't visit Reddit every day, I hardly look at social media. I really, I look at what I need is in terms of news. I check HLTV, right, for news articles and all that, to kind of keep my finger on the pulse. But I don't visit Reddit every day. I very rarely look at Twitter now. It's just I kind of isolated myself, and I feel so much better because of it, because all of a sudden all that white noise is kind of gone. It's not there anymore so much. So it allows me to have a little bit of room to breathe.
Yeah, I think you just like shattered the illusion of all the people who think like talent life is all fun and games right there. But
dude, talent life is fucking nasty. It's hard. It's nasty.
It's fine though, because
it's because it's this nasty thing, because you want to be friends with everybody, and you do to an extent, you do, but in the back of it, it can't be a true friendship, because in the back of it,
it's business.
There's envy, there's jealousy, and there's competition, because you're competing. And this is why maybe now there could be a light at the end of the tunnel for the CS talent if they get together and if they carve it up and say, this is going to be Sato and Henry's space in the year, this is DDK and Bartol's space in the year, this is Anders and Moses' space in the year, and then there's going to be DreamHack Open and others for the guys who are up and coming, and then maybe they get their space. But if they carve it up and just say, these are our city states, and you guys do your thing, we do our thing, and everything is good, and everybody has space, and everybody's working, maybe there's a chance to actually have like a healthy, wholesome thing going on again. But with the way things are or have been, I mean, it's a weird thing to be in, where you're trying to be friends with everybody and you're trying to help everybody, but at the same time you're competing with them, and so you can never truly, be comfortable. There's always going to be something. So it's a nasty place, man. It can get really, really hard. Which is, again, 2017, why I really took a step back, and I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to isolate myself for a while and see how that feels.
Yeah,
And,
I mean,
yeah.
You explained here like the whole background to it, but I also want to pick your brains on one of the points you made earlier, which is like changing the whole like way your cast is built up. And this is going to be another like weird analogy, but like at music artists, you frequently see that, like especially ones that have been have decades in like doing music, is that as the industry progresses, they change the style of their music, and like fans get outraged, like this is garbage, this is not what we want the old artists back. And I kind of figure that this can be applied to casters as well. Like, I know if this is something that you would agree with, but when you're at the top for so long, you kind of like get bored maybe of how you do things, and you want to like kind of mix it up. You want to add new elements to it, and
Sure.
then the fans get upset, like, this is not the old Semmler. We want the old Semmler back. So it is like, as you mentioned, like you try to change it up. How did that all come around?
It's like, it's very. Thorin is the best at this, because yeah, I want to say that Thorin's the best, but at the same time, I know he listens. I know it gets to him sometimes, but I'd say he is the best at dealing with it, where, if he gets hate, he gets hate. If he gets love, he gets love, and he's good with either one, right? And that's a tough place to be in, or that's like hard to get there. Let's not say it's a tough place to be in, but it's hard to get to that point where you have the mental armor to be able to take the good with the bad, because the bad hurts, man. The bad, no matter how you try and protect yourself against it, the bad hurts. You feel it. It's like a sting inside of you. They got to you. Even if you're not going to respond to them, even if you're going to act like you didn't even see the comment, but that there's still a little sting. And how many stings you get, that's what's so tough to deal with. And eventually that fucks with your head, and that's what leads you to trying to change your commentary as well. Is you're like, maybe I can get them to stop. I can get this, like, them to stop stinging me, right? But that's a trap, because they're not going to stop. And so, as the audience grows and as you continue and try and progress, that's when, instead of trying to please others, and this is where Duncan is very outspoken on it, you need to just please yourself. You need to just be able to please yourself. But then that's easier said than done, because that the tournament organizers are looking at Reddit, and they take Reddit very seriously. Sadly, it blows my mind that is what the tournament, like, you have certain tournament organizers that are super good at it, right? At, like, playing the Reddit game and playing the social game. But when it comes and that's great for a TO, because you need the feedback and you need those people tuning in. But from a commentary point of view, it is poison, because you're going to doubt. And this is what I was talking about earlier when it comes to how you do your commentary and how you need to trust yourself and just be comfortable with yourself and have fun doing it. That's poison. It eats away at it like a cancer. It just kills whatever joy you have if you start listening to this, because you're going to second guess everything you do. You're going to start doubting, what actually got you in a commentary and what you're doing and how it feels and all that. You doubt everything, and it eats away at it. It just erodes at your joy. And so that's why you need to take a step back if you're a commentator. You cannot look at Reddit. You cannot look at anything, good or bad. Even if it's a good thing, then it's like, no, just cut it out and try and be the best that you can be and focus on yourself. The only thing that's really tough about that is that that the TOs are out there. The TOs are they're listening to Reddit, and they're the ones hiring you. So maybe if there's a thread with 100 comments in it and they're all saying that Semmler is shit, it's like 100 comments. But the TOs don't look at it that way sometimes. They try, but I mean, like, sometimes they don't look at it that way, and they're just like, man, that's a lot of negative feedback. Man, maybe Semmler is not so hot anymore. Man, we should be looking at this guy instead. That Sado guy, he's really good. It's like, yeah, it's 100 people in 150,000 concurrent people stream.
Yeah.
Like 99%. Well, let's not be that crazy, but like let's say a large majority of the people out there, they're enjoying it. And so you're doing a good job, and that's what you have to remind yourself as a commentator. You know, there are always going to be haters. There's always going to be haters because their lives are so shit and so sad that they have to try and take down somebody else, do everything they can to make that other person feel as miserable as they do. And so that's what you have to deal with. You have to understand those people are going to be there, whether you do a great job or whether you do a shit job. Those people are going to be there. And so once you can accept that, that's the way to get over it and to start progressing further. Because you have to accept it.
It was like incredible to watch actually in a way, because it was like one day there was like nothing, and then just like started spreading like wildfire basically, like the whole hate train that you got. And I mean back then it was like even like easier for them because you were at the top, so it was like you were an easy target almost.
Big target.
Yeah, and moving forward, like, do you think that's something like, without like being a doomsayer or anything like that, like that might happen to HenryG and Sadokist? Like obviously they're like it's
already happening.
Yeah, that's it. It's already happening. But back then, like, they were the community favorite. Mm-hmm. But I think I'm starting to see a trend similar to what you have been experiencing. So do you think that they could actually like go down that path as well if they're not careful?
Of course, and it's not a question of being careful or not. Well, yeah, it's not a question of being careful or not. They will, people will get tired of them, and they already are, and so it's going to come down to, because it's going to happen and because it's inevitable. Henry and Sado just need to focus on what I've been talking about, which is to just find the reason why they're doing it and hold on to that, and that'll get you through, because eventually it can come back. Or maybe it doesn't happen to the same extent that it happened to me. I mean, I'll admit, I wasn't anywhere near the top of my game at the time that I was getting shit on. Some of that criticism was totally valid, because I was in a dark fucking place. But I kept casting because I felt like if I don't cast, I felt like at the time I need to get back on the horse, right? I have to just get back on the horse and keep working, because it's still something that I'm dealing with. I'm still trying to figure out how to be happy and like be all right with because you lose people, and that's just a part of life, right? And so you got to figure out how to deal with that and keep going. Mm-hmm. And so, but at the time I was devastated, but I felt like the decision that I made was I'm going to work really hard so that I don't think about it, so that I can like kind of just put a Band-Aid over it and keep going, and maybe that'll get me through, right? And that wasn't the right way to go about it. I mean, some people can get back on the horse like that and just stuff the feelings down and never think about them and just keep going, right? But in commentary, I don't think that works, because it's not just like an office job where you sit down and you do your work and you write emails. You have to feel good about what you're doing, and that has to come through, because if you're not enjoying yourself, that also comes through on the mic. People notice, and that's when you get some criticism. Whether it's technical criticism on like, oh, I think his commentary is shit because of this, it's just like, no. The reason why you're feeling that is because it's kind of almost like some hippie shit where it's like you're feeling my vibes, man. You get my energy is going through the mic to you, and that's where. And so I think that's the key, is like the vibes that you give off are what people are going to identify with. And so I think my hate train got so out of control is because that's how I felt, and that's how I was like trying to deal with shit. So maybe it like reciprocates, right? Where I was not in a good place, and so obviously the community, they're picking up on that. They don't know what it is, so they're just saying, "Oh, his commentary is shit." But maybe that's something there. I don't know. I've thought a little bit about it, but.
So moving forward from your kind of self-imposed exile from CS and looking forward to next year, you've been tied to the Overwatch League, which I think is pretty much confirmed at this point. So we kind of just want to ask you, in as much as you can share, kind of how that opportunity came about. Did you seek out Blizzard? Did Blizzard seek out you? And obviously this kind of ties in with what you were talking about previously, which is achieving some security for yourself, which obviously you have a chance to do with Owl. So can you talk a little bit about this entire topic?
In a hypothetical world where Semmler was going to go work for Overwatch League, I think Semmler is looking for, this is like if I was looking at Semmler and trying to like understand what Semmler was trying to go through right now.
Obviously.
But I think Semmler was looking for, obviously he wants to continue doing what he does, which is commentate, right? And he wouldn't get those opportunities in CS. So, he loves casting CS, but he just wasn't going to be able to get those same opportunities in CS anymore. And so that's kind of how life, I almost get this feeling now where that's kind of how life works, is that if you just keep your head down and keep going, sometimes things just work out. And so, it just happened to be that, that an opportunity came up, and it was a golden opportunity at the perfect time. It really all felt right. And so, it all kind of panned out from there. I can't, man. I can't give you more than that. I'm sorry. Right now, it's just.
That's all right. We understand.
Yeah, but like not specifically Overwatch League, but you were open from the start to say like move into casting other games, because in the end you have been casting other games before CS:GO, so it's like nothing new to like switch to another title.
No, because I think I can do commentary, because this is what I've realized is it's just in me, in the sense that I just get excited watching people do cool shit. Like I'm at the climbing gym and I see a guy fight, like he almost comes off the wall, but he hangs in there, and fucking just battles and stays on. You can see he's fucking giving it his all, right? And I just can't help it. I'm just like, yeah, man. I'm just like, I just shout. I can't help but like not get excited for that person who's going through something really heinous and hard and hanging in there and turns it into something cool, And so when it comes to games, I see a big play and I recognize, oh man, that was a really sick play. I just can't help it. I'll be watching a stream at home and I'll be like, oh shit, that was sick, And my girlfriend looks at me like, the fuck, and I'm like, I was like, yeah. I mean, he just like microed his Marines like a motherfucker and dodged all those banelings. Like that was sick, And that's just a natural part of me. I've come to understand. I'll be watching something competitive and I'll see something really cool, right? Really hard, really cool. I'm just like, man, awesome. I just get so excited for that person. It's just comes out naturally. And so I had that in BLC. I had that in StarCraft 2. I had that in CS, and I had it in Overwatch when we casted Overwatch in 2016 or 2016.
I think
2016. Yeah.
Overwatch, the E-League, right?
E-League, yeah. And I think that's just the main thing, is this I really enjoy watching people just kick ass and take names. And when that happens, I get excited for them, because I'm just like, man, that's awesome. Like that's got to be such a good feeling for them, man. And I feel like I feel just a little bit of that, and so I let it out. It's just I just shout. I just feel it. Like I get really emotional. Like I'm the kind of guy who, like, even if it's like a happy moment in a movie, I'm crying, I was like, oh, that was so cool. I just sit there and obviously you got to be tough, so you kind of just like act like you're sneezing or something,
Yeah.
But I mean, no, that's just I feel I open up a lot and just feel a lot of that, like whatever it is that I'm watching at the time, whether it be sports or a movie or whatever. I'm a bit of a sponge in that sense.
So with this hypothetical move away from CS, what does this have? What does this entail for your future with Room on Fire? Have you still been collaborating with Room on Fire, or will that continue, or can you not say?
No, nothing changes with Room on Fire, man.
Okay.
Room on Fire just keeps going. That's a separate entity entirely from my commentary, and so Anders and I own 50% each, and that's just how it's going to keep going. Mm-hmm. The real question is where it goes and what it does. That's not something that we kind of put Room on Fire on hold, in a sense, where it's kind of just doing. And so Phil Media, right? Mm-hmm. He's also got the freedom. We basically told him, you have carte blanche to do whatever you want. So just do, right? Treat it like this is your own company, because you really do have that freedom to just like, I want to do this project. Go do it, man. All good. So we kind of gave him that freedom. And then and now that's going to be what we look at next, right? As far as where we go next, what we do next, that's what we're trying to figure out. That hasn't been figured out because really I took a big step back from Room on Fire. I wasn't sure when Anders and I decided to part ways how I felt about the whole thing. Yeah. Initial reaction was fuck everything, and I'm just going to sell my shares to ESL or something and really screw you guys over as hard as I can. But I didn't do that. And so it's really like I instead of doing anything crazy, I just decided, you know what, let it sit and wait, and there's nothing pressing, and we'll come back to it when there is there's the energy to do so and the will to do so. So for now, Room on Fire just kind of keeps going. But as far as like what actually it means or what it happens or what the vision is or where it goes, initially it was supposed to be a talent agency or a union or a guild, right? But it really was a company, and we kind of screwed up with Room on Fire. Really, Room on Fire shouldn't exist in the way that it does. We should have shut down Room on Fire and created a completely separate entity for the casters, a guild really, where everybody just buys in and everybody's on an even field. But then that's such a complicated thing, because what happens when you've got guys who are tier 1? What are they supposed to take the hit for the guys who are tier 2? That's kind of like, yeah, that's kind of how it's supposed to work. But tell that to the guys at tier 1, they're gonna be like, why? For all the reasons that we've discussed,
right?
Why am I going to help the person who may come up and cut me out at the knees?
Yeah.
So it's a tough thing to kind of make that whole guild idea work. And Room on Fire was even worse because Anders and I, like I said, we own 50-50. And so what's the appeal for tier 1 guys to come in and be like, oh yeah, sure, we'll work with you, but you guys are going to like benefit if Room on Fire grows? Didn't make sense, right? Well, it did at a time. There was a time period where it could have worked that way, and Anders and I could have become, just indestructible in that sense. But we let that slip through our fingers. At the time, that's how our brains worked. But now I'm kind of glad that we didn't go that route, and that everything is kind of just right now chill. Everybody's doing their thing, and Room on Fire doesn't have any. People wonder, it's like, oh, it's an agency, like, oh, it negotiates and all that. No. Room on Fire really is just a kind of a brand that everybody's a part of, but it has no say on their professional careers or on negotiating their deals unless they ask. And that's always been the thing. It's like Room on Fire, like you can, if you want like Room on Fire to negotiate as a group or as a package, then we can do that. If you want to take care of it yourself, do that too. And so
it provided a little bit of flexibility, I guess, but nothing ironclad, I guess, for you.
No, because Room on Fire came into being when Anders and I took over NIP TV. So we took NIP TV, we considered that our channel, and so we fought NIP for it and we got it. And then we needed to come up with a name for it because obviously we aren't going to stay as NIP TV, and so it became Room on Fire. But that was still before. That was even before DreamHack Winter, 2013, right? And so at that point, we knew that it was coming, and after DreamHack Winter, you definitely knew that it was coming, considering the viewership, that the tournament organizers were going to stop giving out the Go TVs and we're going to start, doing the production for their streams in-house. And so my vision at the time for Room on Fire was to create a white label studio here in Stockholm, much like Face It did. And Face It were ahead of us because they actually had a company that was already up and running, and they had everybody in Milan already. And so they were one step ahead. And that's what kind of cut us off at the knees, where when my goal at the time, what I was negotiating for and competing against, right, was to create a white label studio here in Stockholm, where we would then approach these leagues and say, let us do the productions for your broadcast and grow it from there. But when that didn't happen, Star Series got picked up by SLTV, and that was a big chunk of revenue for us at the time. ESCA, started in-housing their broadcasts. Everybody started in-housing their stuff, and that I think is what it ultimately led to us not being able to take over in that sense or create a white label studio in that sense. Is because again, then there were responsibilities. I had my girlfriend here in Stockholm. Anders had his girlfriend, now wife, in Denmark. It was going to be hard to get him to move up here, and just like it was going to be hard for me to move down there. And I was trying to figure out, is there talent that can come to Stockholm that we can work with, and that we can kind of turn into a kind of white label studio? Because at the time you had, Beyond the Summit, they were doing that. And, everybody like in different games had done it. And so I saw that as a way to kind of progress further and say, right, now we get to do that too, right? And we start to build our brand that way. It just didn't work out that way because everybody kind of just latched down in CSGO. Instead of it being Dota where they farmed out their leagues and their stuff, it was ESL owning the ESL Pro League. It was, it was Face It owning the ECS. It was, and they really wanted to keep it to themselves. And so instead of developing Room on Fire into its own white label production company, we basically just stuck to commentary and became full-time freelance commentators.
Right. All right, well, I think that's pretty much everything that we have for you. So we're gonna start wrapping it up. So first of all, thank you for taking time out of your morning to join us. And secondly, we just want to give you the opportunity to say anything that's on your mind that we haven't covered in the past hour and a quarter. So if there's anything that you want to put out there to the lovely CS community, go for it.
Just a big thanks. I mean, big thanks for making it all possible, guys. You do wake up in the morning wanting to better yourself when it comes to, because you have those positive fans out there. I mean, the drive, whether there's positive fans or not, this is where I've always kind of been in the middle, where it's, like, yes, okay, there are fans, but you really need, like, are you doing this for yourself or not? Because if you are relying on the fans, again, another lesson learned, right? But if you are relying on an outside source for your happiness, you are fucked. Because as soon as that source turns against you, the way Reddit did against me, then you're doomed. What do you have left? You don't have any faith in yourself because you put your faith into this, and this isn't working anymore. And so, it's like, I really appreciate all of the kind messages I've got and all of the, the fans who have reached out. Fucking A, you guys are awesome. And thanks so much. And thanks to the haters as well for motivating me and for making it, making me really want to get out there and crush it as well. Because, just like there's the positive side from the positive fans out there who are fucking awesome and I love you all, there's also those haters out there who are needling you, again, those stings, right? But those stings do help to get you they act as a catalyst to get you to reconsider or to just get you up in the morning and be like, you know what, I'm going to get out there and I'm going to do the best that I can. And so, thanks to everybody, really, in CS. This isn't goodbye, but it's been a wild ride. It's been a goddamn wild ride. So, really appreciate it.
Well, we'll be looking forward to see when you happen to hop back on the ride again. So thanks again for joining us today, and be on the lookout for the next episode. Peace out, guys.
See you, man.